Welcome back to the Wide Awake Media podcast. I am your host, Didi Denslow, and we're here speaking to real researchers, credible scientists, and conspiracy realists who do not wish to be a globalist commodity. Our next guest is a biochemical engineer, a long time ago, apparently, a problem solver, and a nutrition expert, the Fat Emperor, Ivor Cummins. And you can check out Ivor on YouTube at Ivor Cummins Science, where he uses his critical thinking to solve real-world issues, or find his site on the interweb, thefatemperor.com. Hey, it might be good for your health. He has been a key voice in speaking out against the various agendas being played out against mankind. For that, you should be saluted. It is a pleasure to have you on the Wide Awake Media podcast. Ivor Cummins, how are you?
Oh, I'm great, thanks. Delighted to be here.
And it's great to have you again. And it's been a few years since we last spoke. The first topic, and we have just briefly mentioned it, that I'd like to speak to you about is the sort of the health paradigms that we live by, the processed foods, and in particular, seed oils. What are seed oils, and what are the impacts on our health?
Yeah, seed oils is a big topic. It's much debated. So I have a simple thing for lay people. I've around 3,000 published studies on nutrition and health, and I've been working on this for 13 years. Not much in the last few years, though. So I'm going from memory. But I say to people, there's a thing called the devil's triad. So you know the way we've got massive obesity, and American data many years back had 64% of American adults over the age of 45 are now pre-diabetic or full-blown diabetic. Now, the two are pretty much the same thing. It's a spectrum. So you got 64% of adults in America over 45 who are diabetic, type 2. And if you use insulin to measure, which they don't bother doing, you'll probably get that up to 75, 78%. So you've got nearly 80% of your adults over 45 are essentially diabetic, which is insane. So how could that be? Well, there's a lack of exercise, not really true. It's a problem for sure, but you know, the 70s, 80s, when this exploded, obesity and diabetes, you know, if you look back, it's not really the exercise that changes. In the 50s and 60s, the Americans were all two-car families, you know, it was the age of the automobile.
Yeah,
They didn't really do gyms back then so much. It's not that. So it's the devil's triad. So sugars, refined grains or refined wheats, and seed oils. That's the devil's triad.
Right.
And if you cut out those three, you wouldn't have an obesity epidemic, you wouldn't have a diabetes epidemic. In fact, you know, pharmaceutical companies, 9 out of 10 will go out of business, right? That's how crazy it is. But you said seed oils. So seed oils are extracted with hexane and solvents under very high temperature and pressure. If you went into a seed oil company, these golden vegetable oils, they call them, that you are meant to be heart healthy.
Sunflower oils and things like that.
Sunflower oils, safflower oils, all the oils from seeds. One quick thing, people always ask me, but what oils can you have? Anything crushed naturally from real food, as in real fruits, olives, crushed olive oil. It's okay. Lard, tallow from real animal foods, which are human superfoods. That's fine. You know, butter is fine. But when you get into the seed oils, the cottonseed, the sunflower oils, the safflower oils, the rapeseed oils, they're all done in chemical plants with high temperature and pressure. So one problem with them is they're very high generally in the omega-6 type fats, which you should only have a tiny amount in your diet. You know, they're signaling molecules used in inflammatory processes. You do not want to be eating them as calories. But now Americans, I think, are 15% of their calories are from seed oils. It should be less than 0.5%. It's insane. It's 30 times the evolutionary level, and it's very, very damaging. So they're the omega-6 rich oils. But then the other problem is, you know, the hydrogenation and damage to the molecules from the chemical processes. And if people watch the video, and I think you can still get it online, the making of sunflower oil, right, or vegetable oils, it's absolutely shocking if you see it. I mean, people have to wear respirators and suits at stages in the process. This rank, grey, rancid muck comes off, stinking muck. And when they make the initial oil, you know, you'd never go near it because it would be repulsive. But then they deodorize it. So they've got the technology to take away nature's warning signal not to eat it.
Yeah.
They deodorize, they bleach, they color it golden, and then they give it to you, right? So big debates as to which is the bigger thing driving modern chronic disease. Some of my expert friends are in the camp, like Chris Kenobi or Tucker Goodrich, many more, who say it's mostly the seed oil explosion in the last 100 years. That's the big problem. And then others say, I don't think it is. I think it's the refined wheats and the refined grains and the carbohydrates and sugars. Now, we're not 100% sure which camp is correct. And I say both are correct. We know nearly to a certainty that seed oils are extremely damaging in quantity, which most people are eating in processed food. And we know refined carbohydrates. We know all the mechanisms and we know they're massively damaging. So you just eliminate both. And you can debate all day. But I have studies from the late 90s. These are amazing. They began to do rat studies on seed oils versus beef tallow and lard. And what they found was cancer. So they found major increases in tumorigenesis, the growing of tumors in tumor disposed rats. And they published from around 93 up to around 98 or 1999, increasingly publishing papers, getting louder and louder, saying, wow, seed oils drive cancer if you go over 3 or 4% in the diet. This is interesting because we're telling everyone to eat them. And you know what happened then? Around 98 or 99, obviously the system awoke to these published studies and they stopped. I mean, they fell off a cliff. It was like Bugs Bunny or Roadrunner. They just literally stopped. And you know what that was. Someone made the right phone calls.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. So all the evidence is there. That's the tip of the iceberg. Don't touch them.
Because I saw a statistic the other day. It was like one of those maps that I put out by one of the map accounts on X, and it was all in different colours, and it had the UK in bright dark red for the percentage of the food that they consume that's processed. And I think it was like 54%. And we're the worst in Europe. And we probably have some of the worst obesity rates to match. Now, my understanding of the original use of seed oils is that it was used to oil engines. It was a lubricant. It was a big, you see big barrels of it on American military vessels, and they would stick it into their diesel engines to lubricate the system. And you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why are we all eating so many seed oils, and why is all our processed food absolutely rammed packed with it? Every time you look at it, it's rapeseed oil, when they must know that there is a harm to the public health. Do you think, and I'm putting a tinfoil hat on, do you think that these foods are deliberately pushed on the public because there are some serious health implications, which they can then, their mates over there in Big Pharma can come along and profit from?
Yeah, I think there's actually is an element of that. Not at first, though. I mean, Crisco in the 1910s, I think, they thought, what if people could eat this? Because there's a lot of energy in it.
Yeah.
And it was an idea. And then they found out they could hydrogenate these lawnmower lubricant oils. Technically, they didn't believe there was anything particularly toxic in them because they came from seeds. They didn't come from like crude oil or heavy crude, right? So they had the idea, and then they hydrogenated them and they forced hydrogens back in to make them stiffer and make them solid. And that was Crisco. And that was the birth of the kind of seed oil industry. So that was shocking for the world of human health. It probably heralded in the age of heart disease. But no one really knew, because back then people were all over the place in terms of understanding cause and effect. So that grew and grew and grew. But then when you got to the 70s was the mega tragedy. And that was Ansel Keys and his belief that saturated fats and animal fats were bad. And he and the American Heart Association got in with industry and pushed the seed oils. Now, I don't think that was specifically malign. I think he believed his own BS. But after a while, he probably knew he was cheating. But at that stage, he'd become the guru, and they weren't going to change direction. So I think there were a lot of mistakes made, money being made, power being gained, and they pushed it. But to your question, why? The main reason is cheap as dirt. And if you work in industry, in any industry, get your raw material costs to the floor and
Yeah,
take as much margin as you can.
of course.
So the devil's triad is ultra cheap. I mean, literally, it's ultra cheap. Sugars, refined grains, seed oils. Also, the seed oils, for good reason, give you shelf life. If you use natural fats in foods,
Yeah.
they go off.
Uh-huh.
But if you want an international supply of corporate owned junk food, you also want to use seed oils because, like the McDonald's meal under the seat of your car, and a year later,
Nothing's
it
happened
looks
to
the
it.
same.
Even the
Hey, I'll tell
bacteria
you
doesn't
one.
want to touch it.
Yeah, because even there's a true picture in Australia in a very warm environment, and someone put out a big tray with a knob of butter melting in the sun and a knob of margarine,
Hmm.
and the ants are all over the butter,
Yeah.
and not a single ant will go near the margarine. So I mean, even the ants are smarter than the humans. So it's a huge problem. But I think since the 70s and 80s, there would have been a growing understanding between the food and pharma top executives and scientists at the top level strategically. They begin to realize, hey, this is driving an obesity and diabetes epidemic.
Uh-huh.
And big pharma is living like parasites off the epidemic. So a growing understanding at top levels would be that, hey, we can all make out like
Yeah.
bandits here. So I
Uh-huh.
think a big amount of that crept in the last few
Uh-huh.
decades. And you have big pharma funding the continued education for all the doctors,
Yeah.
keeping them indoctrinated. And you've got big food funding all the dietitian schools and keeping them indoctrinated. And everyone's winning at the top,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And it's the same people who would fund these companies, and they will obviously be aware of this information. And now we're in sort of economic peril here in the West. You talked about the cheap food and the longevity of the food on the shelf. You can't see any time near in the future where this health crisis might be reversed. So worrying times if you like a bit of rapeseed. I'm a tallow or lard man myself.
Oh, tallow, even better because pigs, depending on what they're fed these days, might be a bit high in omega-6, but the best is the tallow. And the pig lard from well-reared pigs, yeah, but there's some more question marks. But then high quality olive oil and what's the other one actually? Coconut oil,
Yeah.
that's fine. There is one more, avocado oil, a little
Okay.
expensive,
Uh-huh.
but these are all real oils from real foods. So, and they're high in saturated and unsaturated fat, which is good, and they're not so high in omega-6
Uh-huh.
polyunsaturated.
Uh-huh. So yeah, if you're listening to this, cut out the seed oils. I did it 3 or 4 years ago, and I do feel much better. My belly's not quite so tubby as it was. Okay, the real reason I wanted to bring you on to the Wide Awake Media podcast, Ivor, is to talk about geopolitics. We've got Davos going on at the moment. We've got digital ID continually sort of reoccurring in the mainstream narrative. Here in the UK, Starmer has said, we're dropping mandatory digital ID, but what he really means is, I'm just going to drop the mandatory bit in the language for the time being. I've seen in Ireland, I recently talked to Rick Munn about this, I've seen that they're following in Australia's footsteps with age verification for social media. Can you tell me what the situation is in terms of the progress of digital ID in Ireland?
Yeah, well, so far there's kind of a government ID which is not mandatory. I'll give a quick example. My driving license, when I renewed it, you're heavily promoted to go with the new type of ID, but it's not really a true digital ID yet. But of course, it will be leveraged in the future and become mandatory. It's the boiling frog. So I dug around and found out you could present yourself at an office and you had to be legally still allowed to get a license without this ID because legally and constitutionally, you see, there's some protections. So I did it that way, but a lot of people will just say, "Oh, I need to get this," and they just get it willy nilly. So
Mhm.
the main thing is awareness that people resist and refuse and cause trouble and civil disobedience and lobbying to stop them boiling us frogs. Right? I think that's the key thing. But it's coming everywhere because our politicians in Ireland are no different than England and everywhere else. I mean, they report up to the network through the European Commission, which
Uh-huh.
is like the Politburo in Soviet times,
Uh-huh.
unelected. And then you've got the European Parliament, which is like the Soviet Parliament in Soviet times. It's a talk shop with no real power. So EU is modeled on purpose on the Soviet system of totalitarian collectivization with unelected bureaucrats. Then you've got the UN, which sprang from Rockefeller's loins. Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Rockefellers, along with the Rothschilds and the Warburgs. All of these structures we've got have been funded and grown. Trilateral Commission, Council Foreign Relations, Bilderberg, WEF, they've all been grown to manage the ant farm of us humans. That's
Uh-huh.
where all our problems come from. And it all
Uh-huh.
goes up essentially to the big banking kind of globalist oligarchs. And they all work together. So we get all this crap that comes down like totally totalitarian, dystopian madness. Give you a quick example, the Irish hate speech law. 1986, we have incitement to hatred law. It's worked perfectly with many convictions over the last 20, 30 years. It's written very well. It doesn't breach our constitution. And if you are proven to incite violence, proven, you do get hammered. And you
Uh-huh.
could say that's fair enough,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, civil society. What did they try and bring in? The globalists, the new hate speech law. And they have around 8 or 10 protected peoples. Huh? What do you mean? We're all protected, right? No, 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 no. 3 or 4 of them are sex stuff, like trans, gay, just sex stuff. They
Yeah.
love the sex stuff. And then you've got traveling people and you've got racial stuff and you got all these classes. And those classes, if you say any hurty words, this is the law they wanted, that if you have anything in your possession, anything at all, in a diary, on a disc, in your house, anywhere, that could dispose towards judgment of these special classes, you're guilty. And you need to prove, if you have writing in your diary that breaches their hate speech, non defined hate speech, if you breach their not really defined hate speech, the onus is on you to prove in a court of law that you would not in the future have shared whatever you have in your private diary.
Pre-crime stuff, isn't it?
Pre-crime, Minority Report,
Yeah.
1984, Brave New World.
Uh,
I could not believe that someone even wrote it. But they got it through one House of Parliament in Ireland, and then luckily the people woke up and it never got through. And I think for the moment it's on the back boiler. But they want to get it through. And the people getting it through, like McEntee, the minister, who's just a corporate globalist droog, right? All of these Irish politicians driving it through have no personal desire to put this crap through. Not really. They know it's nonsense. They're under instruction. So the key thing for people is to understand your politicians, challenge them on who they're reporting to. That's a key thing, I think. Not don't challenge them about what they're bringing in, because that's a waste of time.
uh,
If everyone is saying we see you and we know you're reporting to a non-sovereign, non-Irish authority, bringing in things that are against the people's interests. So who are you reporting to? And everyone keeps asking, keeps telling them, we know what you're at. We see you. I think that's important.
and if you here in the UK, if you email your MP en masse, then they will pay attention to that large voice that's hitting them because they want
Yeah.
to be re-elected. They want to be, on the gravy train, taking all the benefits and expenses and trips to Davos and all the other things that they get. And if they realise that the public are calling them out en masse, then they might change direction. Has that hate speech law in Ireland, is it truly gone away? Or is it like on the black burner and it's going to
It,
come back again in a few years' time and they'll try to push it through again?
I'd say it's waiting in the wings, but equally on a positive note, the awakening is growing, making it less and less likely. Long may the awakening grow, because a lot of people now, even young people, are beginning to realize when we were told it was a conspiracy theory, that high up powers are basically running our lives in a totalitarian fashion. That was part of the scam. We were indoctrinated to believe that higher up, ultra wealthy people running our lives and influencing our governments was a conspiracy theory. But increasingly, people are realizing now, actually, that was a trick to tell us that,
Uh-huh.
because they are running our lives, and our
Uh-huh.
children's and grandchildren's futures are going to be destroyed by these ultra rich oligarchs if we don't start making a ruckus, sending emails. And the other thing that kills me is 1984, it was quoted, the people were interested just in football and gambling. So it was completely easy to rule over them. That's a big problem we have now. I mean, the gambling, I'm getting adverts for gambling morning, noon, and night on
Really?
my YouTube and
Wow.
on other platforms. Gambling is everywhere, and
Uh-huh.
sport is everywhere. We got
Uh-huh.
24/7 sport. People are worshipping these guys who are paid countless millions to kick a ball around, and people are worshipping them because sadly it's a weakness of human nature that because of evolution, most people, there's leaders in the pack, in the tribe, and if you don't honor the leader, you might end up just dying or being
Uh-huh.
killed. So we're programmed, if we're not leaders and wolves ourselves, with critical thinking and self-awareness and strength of character and values and principles, and that's what I'm trying to teach. If we're not that, we're just cattle. And cattle are programmed to worship the leaders of the pack.
Uh-huh.
And if people only understood when they go around screaming about a football match and they just ignore what's happening in Davos and mass migration, and your country going into massive debt and your country being led by banking class. When people ignore that and they're just looking at football and Netflix, they're basically just cattle. So think
Uh-huh.
about that, guys. You're just cattle.
Bread and circuses, as the
Yes.
Romans used to call it. And actually, we've got all these other distractions now. You said sport, gambling, social media. Yeah. Oh, I mean, we had a conversation before I clicked record about social media. I believe, I think maybe the political class are going, I'll tell you what, some of us are now like the superstars. All the hated people will put it onto social media and then we're all distracted on X. We're all distracted on Facebook and we're not actually emailing our MP or out in the streets peacefully protesting to demonstrate against the plans that we rail against on X. We've mentioned Davos. Davos is going on right now. I think the World Economic Forum, since the COVID days, has actually laid quite low. We hadn't really seen massive amounts of Klaus Schwab or Bill Gates or any of these characters. Do you think, not that they had a star anyway, but they realized, and that the Davos now goes under the banner of spirit of dialogue, whatever that actually means. Do you think that exactly? I've actually got the other 5 themes written down, but honestly, they're all bollocks as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Nonsense.
Nonsense. Do you think that they know? And we've heard from Larry Fink, we've heard from Klaus Schwab, who cancels his replies, he turns them off on X, about how they've got to regain the trust of the public. Has their star faded in terms of one of these supranational organizations?
Yeah, now that is a tricky one. Um, Very briefly, we're thinking of making a movie of Tragedy and Hope, the 1966 book by Carroll Quigley, who was an elite insider, and he was Princeton, Harvard, he was Ivy League. Serious dude, unimpeachable, 20 years working on understanding power politics and how the world is run. So you can't question him. But in his book, he revealed that since Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner in the 1800s in the UK or England, they created and funded later with Rothschild money and banking money. And of course, Cecil Rhodes put all of his money from stealing Africa's diamonds and
Uh-huh.
gold, So it's all dirty money, always is. But they funded the network. They created a structure that was meant to be like the Masons or something like that, but much more effective. And its goal was to dominate every inhabitable place on the planet. Big goal. Now, they've done very well. I mean, we saw during COVID how well they did. So the network grew. The UK based networks with Woodrow Wilson in the US took back the US. So they had the War of Independence. America went its own way. Well, the UK crown powers through Rhodes and Milner and all, and with all their agents in America, they got Woodrow Wilson in. They got the Fed created so they could print any money they wanted. They got the income tax brought in 1913. So they began to control America. So over the decades, they also pretty much the Council for Foreign Relations, they set up, and that was their structure for US. And then I think they have, oh God, it escapes me in England. You have the something institute, very famous. I forget. But and they created the CIA essentially, right? So you've got this network that's been driving most of the stuff that's been happening, including World War One, which they needed for many reasons, and World War Two, Rothschild and all the bankers were funding the man with the moustache and both sides. So all of this stuff is orchestrated for the last century. Now, I think recently to your question, yes, the WEF is an organ of the network, as is Bilderberg, but I think there's a bit of tension in the worldwide oligarchies. You've got the rise of BRICS, China's doing its own thing, Russia, to a large extent, wants its own autonomy and its own gig. And now Trump is going for a Monroe Doctrine 2.0. So he's going to grab South America, grab Greenland, grab Alaska, grab Canada, and basically realizing this globalization and America running the world, it ain't going to work anymore. The dollar's dying, you know what I mean? It ain't going to work. So let's pull in. So I think Trump is in tension with the old oligarchies that have had a free run for the last century. If people want a very interesting discussion, if you look up Alex Craner on commodity culture around 2 days ago, the YouTube channel, masterclass in 45 minutes explaining Venezuela and Trump versus the oligarchy. I don't want to go on and on about it here, but I think there's a tension, and the old oligarchy now is a bit scared. They don't like what's happening with Trump. They don't like independence. They don't like the BRICS rising in power. They don't like the fact that they meant to beat Russia into a cocked hat and steal all its resources, and that hasn't worked. And they don't like the awakening of the people, because now WEF is a filthy household name, whereas they worked in the shadows for like a century and no one ever talked about them because they own the media. But now you got social media, you got COVID backlash, vaccine backlash, and now you got all these people talking about them. And that's why they're desperately trying to get in hate speech, Digital Millennium Act, censorship, ID for people to get on the internet. They're really worried about the young people talking, really scared about that. And I think it's all on the razor's edge, all to play for the bad guys and the good guys. I couldn't call it. I think it's all to play for. So let's double down, more awakening, and move towards solution focus. Because you're absolutely right. We needed to talk about how bad everything was so people would wake up. But I think we're beginning to get into now how we target politicians with email shots, real life events like last weekend, the IRL forum that Eddie Hobbs set up in Ireland. We had a packed room of 400 nearly, and we had 12 panels. I was on 3 of them discussing solutions to mass migration, to impossibility of young people buying houses, to debt levels in the country. We discussed everything. And the mainstream media in Ireland, that's totally owned by the government and the globalists, they got a massive shock. You know what they did? They sent out a flurry of hit pieces over 4 days, screeching far right and Trumpism, all the nonsense. We scared them big time because they said, oh my God, this is a professional conference with 400 people in Dublin. These guys are meant to be on, podcasts in their kitchen. And now they've got the American ambassador, came to our forum. And the media go, oh my God, it's terrifying them. So we need more of that in real world.
So like some of the solutions then that you discussed, and I did want to talk about Trump. You said, oh, you don't want to go into it, and that's fine, because I'm like 50-50 on Trump. I don't know what his game is. He's the berserker, isn't he? You don't know what he's exactly going to do or his intentions are. But let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about solutions to immigration. What is the solution to immigration? What is the solution to the digital tyranny that they're trying to impress on us, or the restrictions on our free speech, other than contacting our MPs and saying we're not happy about this, because at the end of the day, the problem lies not just with these big organizations that sit over the top of us, it lies with our own governments and our own institutions and establishments. And until they're changed, maybe, in a whole way, how can we ever change anything?
Yeah, now that is, and you touched on it earlier about what we need to do. But awareness is still a big part of that. So we're not there yet. So we still need to keep working on converting people to sanity and reality and understanding. I mean, the reason I'm making the movie is to explain in a non-conspiratorial way, hopefully to a mass audience, how all of what's happening us is fully structured and coordinated. Mm-hmm. It's zero conspiracy theory, and it's 100% global power politics. And it's got a history back to the 1800s and beyond, and it's unimpeachable. So we're going to be total zero conspiracy theory or even potential of conspiracy theory. It's going to be a factual docudrama. So that's an example. So people who are scared of being called a conspiracy theorist or far right now have something they can actually share with their brother, because they realize this is from an Ivy League guy. You see what I'm trying to do? Uh-huh. Try and get awareness across without talking about chemtrails or 5G or anything that's going to switch them off. Start getting them interested in geopolitical reality. Okay, so that's awareness. The other solutions we talked about, and there were many, on mass migration, it's simple. Do we have someone in Europe who's already doing what needs to be done? Yeah, Denmark. So Denmark is publishing all the non-European migrant crime levels.
Yeah.
And just that graph is scary, shocking, especially sex crimes, right? So this is data, and they're publishing it. Also, I believe
their immigration policy as well, haven't they? So they've made it quite restrictive to get in, and if you get
it's
in Denmark,
6-7 years to become a citizen. Yeah. And like in Switzerland, I think, or could be Denmark, there's a good few of these. Poland, Hungary, they're literally doing the right thing in front of us, so we can use them as an example. But I think in Denmark, 3 years, you cannot be on any kind of subsistence from the government. You need to be working and supporting yourself for the first 3 years. And then I think there's another few years. But it makes sense. In Ireland, if you put one toe on the soil of Ireland and you've thrown your passport away in a bin back in Paris, you can vote within a month or two when you get your paperwork done. Like, it's insane. Like, we discussed what is an Irish person, what is Irishness, and I said I have a simple definition, and it's top of my head. Last few generations, you've lived the Irish experience for the last, I don't know, few generations. Not going to be too anal. That's an Irish person. Someone who just put their foot in the ground is zero Irish person. Yeah. If they're here for a few generations, the kids in a few generations' time will begin to be pretty much Irish. But the government tell us, if you put your foot in the ground, you're Irish. That's obviously falsifiable. That's insane. No culture, no history, no nothing. Mm-hmm. It's insane. So we discussed all those kinds of concepts. But yeah, Hungary, Poland, Denmark, Switzerland, I think they're 7 years. And you need to be self-sufficient. And then in Denmark, I think Sweden may have done this as well. If you try and bring in a relation, it's gotten massively tougher. In Ireland, you can just basically bring them in. It's completely psycho. But then we've got to say the forbidden word, Oligarchy plan.
I wondered if you was going to bring it up, because I've seen you tweet about it or post about it.
Well,
and let's talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, it's so obviously what's happening now. They talk about antiseptic and all, but it's not really about that thing at all. Who cares what Oligarchy was and what religion he was? It doesn't matter. He was funded by big money who liked the cut of his jib. They liked his plans. And he wrote he wanted a mixed race, I think he said Negroid race, they were his words, in Europe, simply because then Europe would lose all of its national identity and would become one big blob that would be much easier for the intellectual class to manage, like an ant farm. I mean, it's an idea. Okay, if I were at the top, I might like that idea. But if I'm in with the people, I don't like the idea of being bred like livestock in that manner. I think it's sick. I think it's sociopathic.
Yeah.
But what's happening the last few years, I mean, it's just obvious and self-evident. There is a relentless drive to flood the zone in Europe and in America until recently. And empirical reality, the evidence in our eyes, no one can give a coherent argument for it. They talk about our birth rates down. But think about this. 25 years ago, Italy and Spain recognized, hey, we're not really having enough kids. So they gave tax breaks for women and marriages and tax breaks for kids and all this kind of support. That's what any intelligent, common sense leader would do in the country. Our demographics leaning off. Let's do massive breaks for people who have kids and let the people who don't want to have kids support that because that's the future of
Encourage
our
mothers to
people, our
stay at
culture.
home, give them support to do so.
Anything you need,
Yeah.
right? They knew there was a bit of a challenge. Anything you need. Put forward 10 or 15 years. The big boys up top saw this. Within a couple of years, that all stopped. The demographic wasn't fixed and the thing was working. And Hungary and Poland are doing it now, and it will work. But somehow it stopped. Someone stopped it. What did the someone start doing, right? It's in the Guardian, it was in the papers around 10 years after that. They all start telling us, if you have kids, you're going to destroy the planet. So they told us not to have kids.
Yeah, yeah.
You're going to destroy the planet. They used the climate pseudoscience nonsense scam in order to actually further stop you having children. And then they gave that a bit of time to percolate. You know, they left it brewing for a decade or so. And then they said, you idiots, you're not having enough kids. We need to bring in Africa. Boom. I mean, it's so obviously the Kalergi plan. I don't care if they go.
I use public transport. I'm not a driver. I'm very environmentally considerate, Ivor. So I use public transport and I'll sit on the top and I live in a coastal area. So it's a nice little drive whenever I want to get around. And I hear all the old ladies talking, talking amongst themselves, the old men, and they're always talking about immigration. People at all levels are noticing it, and probably because half the bus all of a sudden is filled up with people who clearly aren't from this part of the world. Yeah, and you can't help but not notice this. I go to Plymouth. I'm based in Cornwall right now. I spend some time in Plymouth. I'm in a nice little white village here, but if I go to Plymouth, it's mind blowing because like 50% of everybody who I walk past in the city centre area is obviously not from this part of the world. Are we reaching, with the Kalergi plan, a tipping point?
Yeah, it's pretty grim. Ireland had a 2040 kind of plan. I think it was Future 40. Department of Finance. Me and Eddie Hobbs covered it on his Counterpoint show. Really quickly, by the way, Eddie is building a media alternative in Ireland with that forum and with his Counterpoint show. Very professional. And he's not going the political route. He's saying, first, we need a media because we're the North Korea of Europe. All the media are lying to the people all the time. So we need to fix that first, to your solutions thing. But Eddie, we talked about Future 40, and it's quite literally terrifying. And they basically say, we're not having enough kids. So it's Kalergi plan in an Ireland Department of Finance document. And they also say we're going to have 20% less transport use or car use, and then 50% less by 2055. I forget the numbers. But the whole document is we're heading into a 15-minute city that's going to be mostly African.
Yeah.
And they wrote it without any sense of irony. I mean, these are public servants, Irish public servants. But that's the problem. They've lost all of their focus on Ireland because they've been propagandized to believe, no, we're just some kind of breeding farm for the globalists. And somehow they've said, well, okay then. But remember, the public service and the politicians you mentioned earlier, they are being extremely well rewarded, right, to go along with this. The pensions are criminal. And I
or they're
know
not being punished for or whatever. Yeah.
You could be in Ireland, right? You could be a manager in a multinational and pay into your defined contribution pension for 35 years. And your actual pension worth won't get near a nurse's. Never mind the senior public servants. It is criminal, the salaries and the massive guaranteed pensions. And that's how you buy the public servants. And they just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Bought and paid for.
and most of these people are psychopaths, or they don't care, do they? I mean, if you want to get to the top of a business or the top of politics and that, you've got to have some sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies. You've got to be willing to not really care about your fellow man too much, otherwise you'd never be able to do that job. In fact, you'd never be selected to do that job in the first place.
Natural selection.
Yeah.
Same with climate science.
Yeah.
50 years or more, 60 years since Rockefeller Brothers Fund created the concept. Yeah, the big bankers created it. Guess why? 50, 60 years of funding until they eventually have it. After 50 years, that any scientist that questions the data or has an alternative view on the catastrophe gets shut down, loses their grants, career over. And every scientist who whoops it up, well rewarded, flow the money spigot that way. What happens after 50 years of natural selection? You got all the scientists just know exactly what they need to say, and there's zero science anymore. It's gone, long gone.
But you quickly, sort of yes and no answer. Do you think that the climate change narrative is actually dying, particularly as real scientists, if you can dig them out, and we've spoken to Dr. Willie Soon here on the Wide Awake Media podcast. Yeah, classic guy to talk to. Really, really entertaining and energetic. And he's adamant. Oh, we're about to go into a really, really cold period. Are they just going to go climate change? Or is the public are going to go, wait a sec, what's happened to this global warming? You know, Scotland's now under ice all of a sudden. We're talking 30 years time. Will they just...
People, I think the awakening, a lot of people are scared to say it because they don't want to be called a climate denier. But I think a very growing number of people are beginning to think this is bullshit. And I'm quite positive about that. And also, I know people in the energy industry, and they said to me a year ago, the thing is collapsing because the money, people are realizing we can't pay for this. And you can't use the solar and wind in the grid because the grid needs to maintain frequency. Remember, Spain shut down last year or something. You know, the grid is unstable now. And I was told that for the last 10 years, there are engineers who know there's a major problem and they just won't say it in the meeting because they know even more certainly that this climate stuff comes from the top and you can't question it. But that's beginning to break down because people are beginning to have to realize, like, we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars over the last decade or two to go from 85% of our energy is from, you know, real fuels, I call them, to 84.2 or something. It's insane. It's clearly absurd, right? Real fuels are going to be needed. And now look at how they're flipping on the climate hoax, right? Because now they want data centers and they want to pour massive energy into them. And suddenly they don't care about the climate because all the boys up the top who are pushing the climate are now saying, oh, we need data centers, we need CBDC, we need crypto, you know, which is a huge energy use in its own right, crypto.
AI,
So they're self-evidently liars. I mean, I'll give one last example. I was talking to my daughter last night. It's so funny. It's just like shooting rats in a barrel, right? So my daughter was saying, yeah, but, you know, is Putin not a threat to Europe? And I just laughed and I said, zero. I'll tell you how much threat. Remember in The Big Short where he goes into Vegas and he says, what's the probability of you guys being alive next year financially? And then he says zero, right? Zero Putin coming into Europe. Complete absurdity, right? I'll hold a hostage to fortune here. But I says, think back. The media were telling you after Ukraine for a couple of years, Putin has cancer, Putin's gone, the Russians are all dying, they haven't got a hope of winning in Ukraine, they're barely holding on by their fingernails. So you got this huge country, 150 million people, and they're saying they can't, they're complete useless going after one country beside them, a little one. The same people are then turning around and telling you Putin can come across Europe. How stupid do you have to be to not know with a certainty that they're lying about Russia's intentions of doing anything to Europe? How stupid do you have to be when you were told by the mainstream and the oligarchs how Putin was on his last legs and Russia was, forget about it. And then they turn around to you like goldfish and suddenly tell you they're all powerful. People are beginning to realize how stupid they've been, I
Uh-huh.
think.
I mean, I don't want to get into the wars, but I do want to quickly touch on the data centers because it was Larry Fink who come out, literally one of the most powerful men on the planet, at least optically for us plebs to look at, is AI. And he was talking about data centers. We needed to manage all our data. We needed to manage AI. And I'm thinking about the job apocalypse. We've talked about immigration. We've talked about digital ID, CBDCs, climate change, and we've got AI. Will AI go away or be restricted? Or are we actually, otherwise, we are facing a potential job apocalypse? And what's going to happen to all the people? Are we all going to be sat collecting benefits or UBI,
UBI,
or
all
they're
the
going to
way.
have to reduce the population?
Well, I don't think you have to because at the end of the day, you can turn on and off the Kalergi plan as you see fit. And the way to lower population is just to make an environment where people don't want to have kids. Lots of abortion, lots
Yeah.
of having a kid will destroy the planet. Look what it's
Uh-huh.
doing to us. So you
Yeah.
don't need to kill anyone.
Yeah.
All you need to do is turn off the spigot, right? Down in the
Okay.
loins.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
don't need
Right.
drugs to do that.
Uh-huh.
All you need to do is create a society where everyone believes they shouldn't have kids. And
Uh-huh.
selfishness will do the rest.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
people are blessed for not having kids, it'll overcome a lot of their desire to have kids. And they'll say, well, actually, if I don't have kids, I can have a more selfish life. So that's easy enough for depopulation. I think it's going to hit a lot of careers and it's going to cause a lot of pain in employment over time and the robotization and
Yeah.
further robotization. But you know what? There'll still be loads of jobs where you need a real person, and AI has zero intelligence. I said zero earlier. Zero sentience, zero intelligence. I have fun with the AI, even the best stuff. And you can steer it one way and then you can kind of trip it up and steer it
Yeah.
the other way. It
Yeah.
has no sentience, it has
Uh-huh.
no intelligence. It's just a massive learning model that's a massive correlation machine.
I understand
But it has
words.
no thinking brain.
Mhm. Do you think
So
that?
it,
Well, how much? Well, might that change though? Might we?
no,
I mean,
no,
there are the Kurzweils in the world and the Hintons who believe that there may be an element of consciousness creeping into this
no.
digital mind, and that it might develop in the future.
Personally, I don't deep dive in this. I use a couple of guys who are good, but the guys I trust say, no, the step to sentience is so enormous. We are babes in the wood. All they can do is make it have more and more correlations it can make, but it can never have the sentience of a human. I mean, even a handful of humans up against AI in true strategic, long game battle, AI, it just can't do what humans can do.
Uh-huh.
But what it can do is rote tasks.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it can write a whole program and create a website for you in seconds, whereas it'd take a good programmer like weeks. So don't get me wrong, enormous power in one vector for rote tasks, but it has no understanding and interpretation. It's just pulling from all the internet and it's just going with the face value of what it's pulling. I mean, it can't look beyond the data into the motivations. It
Yeah.
hasn't got
Uh-huh.
sentience.
Even its improvisation is still
Yeah.
in within certain boundaries, like you said, of a data set that it has access to, and it
It's a
can.
simulation of
Yeah,
sentience.
yeah.
But I mean, I don't know that there's any route in the coming decades to even approach sentience. Not that I'm aware of.
And I'll take that as a positive
A
place,
positive.
a positive place for us to finish. Ivor, it's been great to talk to you again. Maybe we'll be face to face again in a few more years' time to see where we are compared to the conversation that we've had now. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Are there any links, sites, websites, anything like that you'd like to promote here?
Something occurs to me. I was just asked to co-host some of the panels in Battle for Science, 9th and 10th of February near Amsterdam in the Netherlands. They have 700 or 800 people planned for each evening, 9th and 10th. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a fantastic event. So I'm going to go over and host it. I'm going to be mixing with all the people at it. And they have Peter McCullough, and they have Del Bigtree, and they have Professor Matthias Desmet, and I could go on all day. So they got mega names. So that's going to be fantastic. And yeah, there's other events coming up like Mavericks in Bulgaria. Any other links? Not really. Oh, just on things that are going to get tricky. So as I always say, physical gold and silver. So I've been telling people, like, just mention my name in Pure Gold in London, Pure Gold Company. But the point is, the people I was guiding that way 3 years ago, no financial advice, like they're up 3x on average on gold and silver, where the markets have gone up 30% and many investments have gone nowhere. And I think the markets, the S&P, the Nasdaq, next year or two, we're going to get a correction from hell. I mean, it's going to burn pensions, and the dollar's collapsing in value and the fiat currencies.
You see that with the ratio between the pound and the dollar at the moment. It's pound
look,
of
it's the
fiat is
ratio
really strong.
between Andrex toilet paper and Tesco home brand toilet paper. They're all toilet paper.
Yeah.
They're all going down.
Ivor, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Please take care, my friend. Go and check out those conferences that he just mentioned. 800 people a night. God, that's about 100 times more than Trudeau can gather at WEF. So you can tell where the popularity is and where the interest is. Please stop eating seed oils. Bad for you. And whatever you do, please tune in and stay awake.